One morning at sunrise, Peter sits on a rooftop, feeling restless and unhappy with his life. Looking for someone he can talk to, he confides in Mary Jane. She helps him realize his unhappiness isn't a Spider-Man problem, but a Peter Parker problem, and encourages him to talk to his aunt. Hugging Peter as he departs, MJ feels a jealous pang from Peter turning to another woman, yet a surprising pride in her own maturity for prioritizing his happiness. Sometime later, MJ calls Aunt May asking for Peter, as she has received a call about an emergency in her family and must travel out of town. Meanwhile, Peter reflects further, realizing he spent so much time as Spider-Man that he's been denying himself as Peter Parker. It's time to put Peter first and advance his life, something that should have been done years ago. With his mind made up, Peter visits Mary Jane, handing her a bag of candies since he couldn't afford champagne and roses. Frantically packing her bags, MJ tells Peter she's been trying to get in touch with him and needs to go out of town. But Peter can't wait, and as MJ mulls over her dilemma, he shocks her by asking her to marry him. However, MJ says no, citing the suddenness of the proposal and reminding him they've been just friends lately. As Peter pries further, MJ changes the subject to her trip to see her sister Gail, quickly leaving to call a taxi without providing details. However, on the flight to Pittsburgh, Mary Jane regrets not confiding in Peter about her family issues. Upon arrival, MJ finds Gail isn't home, with her children being cared for by a family friend. She is then shocked to discover her sister is in jail. MJ goes to visit her, questioning what Gail could have possibly done to end up there. But Gail is in no mood to see Mary Jane, bitterly rebuking her for abandoning her years ago in her time of need. Hurt, MJ leaves, but attempts to keep her emotions buried. Then, returning to Gail's home, MJ is shocked to find her father waiting for her. After this encounter, MJ calls Peter in tears, asking him if he can come to Pittsburgh. Putting all else aside, Peter travels to help MJ, and upon his arrival, she hugs him, thanking him for coming. But Mary Jane's father, Philip, is not impressed by Peter's arrival, and he scolds MJ for bringing an outsider into their affairs. Unwilling to listen to his harassment, MJ storms off and Peter follows, joining her for a ride to find a private place to talk. At a nearby park, MJ recounts her past family problems and conflicts with her sister, revealing she has learned their bitter father convinced Gail to steal a manuscript to advance his own career. Now that Gail is in jail as a result, Philip has turned to Mary Jane to have her do the same. This has left her unsure of what to do. While Peter voices concerns about the consequences of helping her father, he swears he'll support her fully and help her live with the choices she makes. Thanking Peter, MJ admits he helped her clear her mind, and she knows what she must do. Then, kissing Peter, she tells him that she loves him. Going back to see her father, MJ announces she will help him, startling Peter. Despite this, Peter supports her when she returns to Gail to get information about the manuscript. But Gail and MJ get in another argument, and after MJ leaves, Peter stays to convince Gail to share what she knows. Later, Peter and MJ sneak into a building and retrieve the manuscript, but as they do, Smythe smashes through the wall in one of his robots, aiming to destroy Peter. Peter then battles Smythe as Spider-Man and leads him to a bridge out in the city. There, Mary Jane tries to help by smashing her car into the robot's leg, but it persists in its attack on Spider-Man. As Spider-Man starts to lose the battle, Mary Jane gets a baseball bat from a kid nearby and saves Peter by striking the robot, causing it to drop him. In response, Peter goes all out, beating the robot down in a frenzy and saving Mary Jane just in the nick of time. With Smythe defeated, Mary Jane tells Peter that they make a good team, and Peter vows he'll never let anyone hurt her, as long as he lives. MJ responds with a smile, saying that she already knows that, calling Peter Tiger. Returning to her father, MJ hands over the manuscript he wanted. As he boasts that Gail was merely a dupe and her sentence should be light, the police enter the room, announcing Philip Watson is under arrest. Realizing his daughter contacted the police and set him up, Philip is escorted away. Watching this, MJ reveals to Peter she realized that Gail and she need each other more than they needed Philip. Reflecting on their day, MJ tells Peter he's good for her, and in response, Peter says they're good for each other. 2 days later, MJ has paid the bail money for her sister's release, and they say their goodbyes. At the airport on their return to New York, MJ sits with Peter reflecting on how all her life, she has run away from her problems. But with this experience, she realizes she has matured, reaching a point in her life where she is ready to stop running from responsibility and commitment. With this, she pursues happiness and agrees to marry Peter. Days before the wedding, Mary Jane arrives with her luggage, preparing to move into Peter's apartment. There, the young couple discuss Peter's recent superheroics, the intricacies of how he photographs himself during battle, and the cramped living conditions. But as Peter is about to call their aunts to inform them of their plans, MJ announces she has to leave for a photo shoot in a limo. Watching his fiancée depart from his window, Peter contemplates her lavish lifestyle compared to his usual broke state, hoping he can keep up once they are married. The next day, Peter meets up with Mary Jane at her apartment for lunch. There, he presents her with a proper engagement ring, purchased with a bonus from the Bugle. While MJ is elbow deep in linguine, Peter amuses her by kneeling upside down from the ceiling to playfully give her the ring. As they sit down to eat, they discuss the upcoming wedding. The question of doubts arises, but an awkward pause is interrupted by a phone call. It's MJ's old friend Bruce, calling to catch up. After the call, MJ tells Peter that Bruce tried to talk her out of the marriage, while she shrugs it off. Realizing the time, MJ has to leave to meet her wedding dress designer, and she kisses Peter on the cheek goodbye. Later, after visiting her dress designer, MJ is greeted by a stranger who hands her the keys to a Ferrari. Confused, she gets in the vehicle only to find a message from Bruce. The car is hers, and he has tickets to Paris in the glove compartment, prompting MJ to smirk at his wild efforts. Meanwhile, Peter is over at Aunt May's, reflecting on his past and his first love, Gwen Stacy. Aunt May remarks that she also gets nostalgic when big changes are about to happen. When Mary Jane arrives, Peter and she announce their wedding plans to Aunt May and Aunt Anna, who are both thrilled for the young couple. After their visit, MJ tells Peter she plans to meet a friend. This turns out to be Bruce in the Ferrari, with whom she hitches a ride. Arriving back to Peter's apartment, Mary Jane reveals she's been walking around Manhattan the past few hours and asks Peter where he goes to think. Peter says somewhere private and quiet, and MJ requests he take her. This ends up being the top of the Empire State Building, much to MJ's surprise. Seeing the views and the bridge where Gwen Stacy died, the subject of her death inevitably arises, leading to an awkward silence. Then, Peter swings MJ back home, and she admits that swinging with Peter is a bigger kick than any crosstown bus or limo could give her. Once home, MJ reminds Peter about picking up their marriage licenses, and they kiss each other goodnight. But sleep that night proves elusive for Peter, and the specter of Gwen's death weighs heavily, making him fear the future's potential cost. The next morning, Mary Jane calls, thrilled about her wedding gown and eager to show Peter, but he is troubled by his doubts. After a visit to the license bureau and a lunch meeting with his bride-to-be, Peter starts to bring up his worries about going through with things. But MJ excitedly distracts Peter, showing him a picture of her wedding dress, and he decides to push his doubts aside. That evening, bachelor and bachelorette parties take place, and afterward, Peter dreams of a nightmare wedding where all of his villains are present. Meanwhile, Bruce arrives in his Ferrari one last time, attempting to sway MJ to cancel her wedding and leave with him for Paris. MJ realizes she must make a decision. At the same time, Peter visits the site of Gwen's death, questioning his future. He too must make a decision. Finally, the day of the wedding arrives, and despite the past hesitation and anxiety, they both arrive at the last minute to their wedding ceremony. Remarking that being late is fashionable, MJ asks Peter if he is ready, and he replies he's never been more ready for anything in his life. Thus, the ceremony begins, and MJ vows to take this man, this very special man, to be the most important thing in her life, because that's exactly what he is. In response, Peter declares that Mary Jane knows better than anyone else what she's getting herself into, and she still wants him. How could he say no to that? With their vows made, Peter and Mary Jane Parker are pronounced a married couple. During the reception, MJ notices Peter is looking down, and he reveals that he wishes he could afford a honeymoon. But she surprises Peter with tickets to Paris that she received from Bruce, explaining they were a wedding present from a friend. 2 weeks later, the Parkers arrive home from their honeymoon, Peter carrying the luggage with one arm and his wife with the other. MJ swoons over his display of power, giving him a passionate kiss. Commenting on the wild adventure they had on their honeymoon, MJ says planning dinner and unpacking is going to feel mundane in comparison. Likewise, Peter says, after 2 weeks at a fabulous villa, what the heck are we doing living in a dump like this? Wrapping her arms around her husband, MJ responds that they're doing exactly what they'd be doing anywhere, living happily ever after. The story of the Parkers' honeymoon begins with the newlyweds arriving at Bruce's posh vacation home. As Peter is astonished by the lavish home, MJ announces it as their residence for the next few days, then helps him pay the cab driver as he struggles with the foreign currency. Cheerful about their upcoming experience, MJ playfully asks Peter if he needs help with their bags, prompting him to show off a bit for his wife. Peter feels liberated, able to truly be himself in front of Mary Jane, who claps at his antics, telling him bravo. Touring the home, Mary Jane proclaims its fabulousness, joking that Peter is fortunate to spend his time there with her. However, she discreetly hides a picture of Bruce, recognizing Peter's sensitivity to such things. Just then, MJ hears a scream. Checking on Peter, she finds him in shock, gawking at a bathroom bigger than his entire apartment. As Peter claims Bruce has everything, MJ holds Peter's face and tenderly reminds him, "Not quite, mister. You have me." Days later, the newlyweds walk the beach hand in hand. Peter remarks on the beauty of their surroundings, saying it's too bad they have to return home. In response, MJ jokingly entertains that they could stay, though she concedes the commute would be murder. But Peter is lost in thought, dwelling on his financial problems and his inability to provide his wife with the lavish lifestyle she is accustomed to. Seeing the look of concern on Peter's face, MJ distracts him by announcing an impromptu swim. As Peter counters that he doesn't have a swimsuit, MJ exclaims that he won't need one, while removing her dress before jumping into the water. That evening, the Parkers eat out at a posh restaurant, as Peter feels a bit out of his element. But MJ is in high spirits, proclaiming that she loves Peter and loves being Mrs. Spider-Man. As Peter instinctually warns MJ to keep her voice down about Spider-Man, some old friends of Mary Jane call her from another table, and upon learning she got married, one labels it the kiss of death. Peter is unnerved by the phrase and gets caught up in his insecurities, but Mary Jane quickly sits back down to snap him out of it. But the Parkers' privacy is short-lived, as another of MJ's past acquaintances, Carmen, approaches and makes a show of trying to steal MJ away from her new husband. While MJ makes it clear that Peter has her heart, he persists, promising her riches and fame. On the ride back to their vacation home, MJ tells Peter not to let Carmen's words bother him, explaining he was being annoying on purpose, but Peter remains caught up in his financial insecurities. Seeing this, MJ pulls the car over. To snap Peter out of it, she kisses him, and they share a romantic view of the moonlight shimmering over the water. Later at their villa, the Parkers notice the lights are mysteriously on, and Peter investigates, finding his faux Puma waiting for him. But Puma is not there for combat, and instead presents Mary Jane with a wedding gift. MJ opens the gift to find beautiful crystal lovebirds. In disbelief, Peter talks to Puma, who then presents him with a high-paying job offer. Elaborating on the details, Puma sounds convincing enough to sway Mary Jane. But Peter is skeptical, as the offer sounds too good to be true. As he ponders it out on the beach, MJ appears and comforts him, prompting Peter to promise her that everything will be fine. The next day, Peter accepts the offer, while MJ is visited by friends who have arrived to party with her. As Spider-Man begins his mission, Mary Jane starts her night out at a dance club with her friends. Afterward, she goes to a cafe, where she discusses how special Peter is. Meanwhile, Peter's mission does not go as planned. After MJ pays for dinner, she sees Puma sitting at a nearby table. Speaking to him, she learns he is waiting for Peter, who is now over an hour late. As Puma begins to berate her husband as an amateur, MJ avoids answering him directly by just complimenting his appearance, further enraging Puma as his claims are being ignored. Then, she announces that Peter is there, as he suddenly appears before Puma, angrily dumping the shredded supplies that Puma gave him for the mission. Peter deduces that Puma used him, and the mission was only a ruse to monitor his abilities. Furthermore, Peter proclaims that Puma can take his job and shove it, declaring he'll find his own way to provide his wife the life she deserves. As Peter lays into Puma, MJ's friends all begin to cheer Peter on, impressed by his display of confidence, and MJ smiles proudly. Peter's final words are that while he may not have a lot of money, at least he has self-respect. MJ then simply utters a half-hearted goodbye to Puma, proudly taking Peter's hand as they leave the scene together. Days later, the Parkers are all packed up to leave, as they share a final walk on the beach. Peter expresses regret over his confrontation with Puma the other day, but MJ insists he didn't blow it. Then, affirming their love for each other, the Parkers share a kiss. But the romantic moment is interrupted as Puma appears, claiming he came to apologize. After admitting he treated Peter like a child and didn't trust him, Puma offers his apology, which Peter accepts. Puma then departs, wishing the Parkers success and happiness. This time, MJ offers a sincere goodbye. Taking his wife by the hand, Peter declares that they have a plane to catch and a new life to begin together. Unfortunately, the promise of a new life is brutally interrupted when Peter Parker is buried alive by Kraven the Hunter, forcing Mary Jane to face the stark reality of being married to Spider-Man. Gazing out the window as the rain pours, she contemplates how she thought being a newlywed would be different. But right now, she doesn't even know where her husband is. As she imagines him out fighting one of his villains, her thoughts lead her to the fact that he is probably dead. Mary Jane pushes the thought away, but it keeps returning as she sees a rat darting across the shadowy floor. Taking a shoe and striking the rat mercilessly, the The thought of her husband being dead echoes through her mind with every blow, while far away, another rat skirmishes across Spider-Man's grave. Feeling both worried and isolated, Mary Jane sets out on the streets to look for signs of Peter. Just as she starts to feel ashamed for fretting over Peter's late nights as Spider-Man, a gang of misfits catcalls her. MJ increases her pace, hearing the men giggle like chimps in heat. But the gang overruns her and backs her into a corner. As the words, "I'm dead," echo through her mind, MJ looks up to see the imposing figure of Spider-Man looming overhead. Though saved, the brutal assault Spider-Man unleashes on the gang makes Mary Jane immediately recognize it's not Peter. Unknown to her, Kraven the Hunter has donned Peter's costume and is stalking the city in his place. 2 weeks later, with Peter still missing, Mary Jane's desperate isolation finally drives her to Robbie Robertson. Having avoided confiding in anyone to protect Peter's identity as Spider-Man, MJ realizes the futility of her visit upon arrival. When Robbie inquires why she's there, Mary Jane is at a loss for words. Alarmed to see her shaking, Robbie tries to help, but MJ quickly apologizes for bothering him and leaves in a hurry. Meanwhile, buried in the grave, the name of his wife, Mary Jane, surfaces from Peter's subconscious. Crawling out of the abyss, Peter thinks of his wife, vowing he's coming for her and professing his love. Kraven's gunshots then echo through his mind, interspersed with the jolting fear of losing the life he's just begun with his new bride. As the specter of Kraven in Peter's mind insists that he's killed Spider-Man, Peter defiantly proclaims his love for Mary Jane. The power of those words then propels Peter out of the grave, as he repeats, "I love you," to his wife once more. Stumbling through the halls of Kraven's residence, Peter finds the latest newspapers scattered across the floor, revealing he's lost 2 weeks of his new life with his wife. His thoughts turn to her, wondering what she has endured. She must have been waiting, wondering, knowing a lunatic was posing as her husband, an imposter, framing him as a killer. Kraven. He stole 2 weeks from the newlyweds. 2 weeks, gone, defiled. With this, a swelling of emotions runs through Peter, and his soul cries out, saying, "I love you, Mary Jane, more than I ever realized." After flipping through channels, Mary Jane throws the remote to the floor in despair. Suddenly, she hears the familiar thwip of a webline. Turning in astonishment, she sees her husband in the window, rain spattering on him as he holds the device he retrieved before it hit the floor. Mary Jane calls out for Peter inquisitively, and he removes his mask, sitting next to her on their bed. After holding each other tenderly, Peter gently lays his wife down, to love her. That evening, Peter snaps awake, realizing he's not in the grave. He's home, and his wife is there. As Mary Jane returns to the bedroom, she sees her husband suiting up and immediately asks him what he's doing. Peter, barely able to speak, says he'll be back soon. But MJ protests, reminding him they've both been through a traumatic experience. As his wife starts to recount everything he's endured, Peter can only respond that he doesn't want to talk about it. With nothing left to say, MJ simply asks if her husband is going, and he confirms he is. Looking at his wife lovingly, Peter takes her hand and rubs it against his masked face just as lightning makes a thunderous boom. Then, he swings away to defeat Kraven. After a long, intense night, in a final battle against Kraven, as well as a grueling follow-up battle with the creature vermin, Peter finally makes his way back home for good. As MJ flips through a photo album, reliving shared memories with her husband, she hears a door creak, signaling Peter's return. Jumping up from her bed, Mary Jane rushes to her husband to hold him in a loving embrace. What a relief for Mary Jane to have Peter back, at last.